heart of Silicon Valley. It's What's Up in the 90s, an entertaining look at people, places, and things, and how they affect you, your family, and your career as we move into the 90s. Now here's your host, Brian Stuckey.
Hello, welcome to What's Up in the 90s. We've got a great show for you today, especially if you're a baseball fan. We've got Rick Schroeder from the Texas Rangers here with us, Sandy Wihtol, who's a former professional baseball player with the Cleveland Indians, and Jim Hemphill, who's coached in the area in the Santa Clara Valley for a number of years, especially over at Homestead High School. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Rick, we're going to start with you. This show kind of centers around you a little bit because Jim and Sandy met each other through baseball, of course. Sandy went to Homestead High School. Jim was his coach there. And then you came into the picture as a professional baseball scout when you saw that Sandy had the ability. Not you in particular, but a scout saw that Sandy had the ability to play professionally. So it centers on you and the relationship that the three of you have together. And I just want to ask you, for people that don't know what professional baseball scout what they do, what exactly is your job description? What kind of things do a scout check for?
Well, Brian, you're not the only one that doesn't realize what baseball scouts do. If you ask Mrs. Schott, her comment regarding baseball scouting was...
Smart shot?
Yeah, okay. Is that all scouts do is go out and watch baseball games? And she put that in perspective pretty well, and I think she lost a lot of scouts after that comment with Cincinnati. But basically, the job description I have is to be simplified. The requirements will be to know what baseball is all about, know how to evaluate a player in general, and basically many of the scouts coming into the field now have been college and high school coaches and have played some professional baseball. And if you played those three categories, amateur, professional, then coached, you're able to somewhat judge talent better than the average person is able to do that. There are a lot of fathers out there that watch their sons play, and they seem to think they know what their son can do and can't do, but he doesn't really judge his son against the whole big picture of baseball, all the people that are out there playing. And sometimes fathers are misled into thinking their sons are better than they really are. And that's where I come in. And sometimes I have to come in their home and give them the sad news that their son is not quite the player that he thinks his son really is, because I have to stack his son up against players all around Northern California. Mm-hmm. Basically, I drive 50 to 60,000 miles a year in my car. The club gives me a car to drive. I'm on expenses. I stay in lots of hotels. In fact, I work for the Texas Rangers, and lots of people give me the state rate throughout the state because they think I'm working for the Texas Rangers, meaning the law enforcement agency. They don't realize that there's actually a baseball team called the Texas Rangers out here sometimes. So it can be comical at times. But basically, driving that car, being able to evaluate a young kid at a young age, and being able to somehow project his ability 3 or 4 years from the time we basically see him. So when I'm looking at a high school kid, I will try to see and figure out this kid's going to be how much better in 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then it's my decision to think this kid should play professional baseball now or he should go to college or whatever.
Okay.
So that's...
Okay. And Sandy, with you, you were scouted as a high school player. You were drafted by the Kansas City Royals, I believe, in 1973. Eventually signed with the Cleveland Indians after attending De Anza for a year. What was it like being in that situation where there's a lot of pressure on you about making a career decision that early in your life? A lot of people don't make career decisions like that quite that soon, but you had a choice between college and professional. What were some of the factors in there that determined your decision?
I think it's everybody's kid to play professional baseball, and having I guess be termed a luxury to have that decision, and had a lot of good scholarship offers to go to some of the four-year schools, and I don't think it was so much pressure at that time. It was excitement that to have that opportunity to go out and play professional baseball, and in my situation it came down to kind of weighing what the offer would be from the Cleveland Indians, who eventually signed me, versus going to college, and at that point the money was right that I felt it was time to get off into professional sports. So in terms of pressure, I think at that age it hasn't really hit yet, and we can talk about that more once you get into professional sports. But the first part of playing pro ball and just the thought of it was the excitement. And I think that is kind of a driving force in my enthusiasm and efforts in baseball.
It must be tough, too, as a player, trying to determine when your best marketability would be, when you're going to make the best money. Would you go to a junior college like you did for a couple of years, and are you going to make the most money at that point or out of high school?
Right. Well, in fact, Jim and I were talking about that earlier this morning, and it's my belief, and from my experiences playing almost 10 years, I saw more kids that came out of high school that were released because they weren't given the opportunity to really get their skill levels up. They had to adjust to a lot of other things besides the slider on the black. They had to learn to living out of the buses and the 10-hour bus trips in the lower minor leagues. And a lot of kids just can't really handle that, and they have so many other things to deal with besides baseball that it gets to them. And so, you know, it's my opinion that you know, waiting. And I had some in fact, the schools, I did go to Washington State, as you know, and left there to eventually sign after De Anza. But the four-year schools offer a lot to kids, and if you're going to be in pro ball for a while, you're going to sign whether it's out of a junior college, high school, or if it's a four-year college.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jim, what's it like coaching a player of Sandy's ability or another player that you've coached in the past? What's it like being in that situation where you might have an influence with them where they determine whether they go college or professional?
First of all, it's fun coaching an outstanding prospect. That's always one of the real good things. A number of reasons that they want to learn, especially those that, like Sandy was, that had very, very good ability. They're almost like a sponge. They'll listen to you. They're very, very coachable versus somebody who's just out there and has a good time and doesn't really have any aspirations. So to answer your first part, it's fun coaching a prospect. And then what I always try to do is teach them to play the right way. Because of my experience in professional baseball, teach them the professional way, which I think is the right way to play the game. Mm-hmm. And so they learn at the high school level the way it should be played. And then when you have somebody like Sandy's ability and some of the other players I had that go through and listen to you and perform and do that, the point of what you advise them, it really gets down to making them aware of options. I think as a high school coach, you can't tell anybody, here's what you should do. You give them the options. You can give your advice, but you should always let the person who is going to make the decision make the ultimate decision without putting pressure on them where they don't feel good about their decision. And as a coach, my biggest thing is always just to provide all the options and the best that I could, and then let them make the decision.
Do you ever have any problems with parents sometimes that, let's say, the father really wants them to play professionally, and you think it's in the best interest that maybe they look at a college or something? You ever run into situations like that?
Yeah, I did, and I have. I've always believed in being honest with people, and if I didn't think, and Sandy had tremendous ability coming out of high school when Kansas City drafted him, but I felt, as it turned out, and what he did was right, I felt the best thing, especially in light of the fact the offer that they made, he wasn't quite ready to get into professional baseball. And at that, a year between 18 and 19 is a big year of maturity. So you have to be honest with the player and tell them, even though someday down the road they're going to be a professional baseball player, sometime it's your responsibility as a coach to tell them, I think you might want to wait a year. Now in Sandy's case, he ended up going to a four-year school, but he ended up coming back. Had he stayed in a four-year school, he wouldn't be able to sign until after his junior year, but he did come back and went to De Anza, and at that point, he was much more prepared to play at the professional level than he would have been if he'd signed right out of high school.
Okay. Sandy, in retrospect, do you think you made the right decision, or do you sometimes look back and wish that you would have gone 4 years in college?
Well, you always wonder what would have happened. In fact, the schools that I had offered four-year scholarships to all ended up College World Series, which would have been my junior year. But in reality, no, because baseball offered just an outstanding opportunity to meet with people, learn to deal with a lot of different personalities, a lot of egos, the pressures, and you have to survive. And I couldn't trade that for for anything, and I did go back to school after I got out of professional baseball, and so in the answer to the question, no, it really worked out good, and I really had a lot of good opportunities in sports.
Mm-hmm. Great. Rick, I got to ask you too, as from a scout's responsibility, do you have a single focus, and that's assign a kid, or how do you influence a kid, you know, in the decision process? Would you recommend that a kid go to college rather than sign with you?
Boy, I weigh every single kid that I've ever cared about or evaluated as a prospect and that I really liked. I go to their house, and I talk to the mother and the father, or one or the other, and I find out from them what they want for their young man. And sometimes it's not all that much regarding money. The money's not the important factor for some families. Some families, money plays a big part in what this young man's going to do. But I go in and I find out if the parents are really pushing the kid to go to college, I back off to a point. Then I want to talk to the young man and find out what he wants. But really, you can find out what mother and father want. You've got to bend over backwards for the mother and father to get on the right side of them and to do best for the young man. I had a young man last year that I had to let go to UCLA. He wanted to sign, but his parents were very, very opposed to it, and I couldn't get him the dollar figure that he really wanted. He wanted $50,000. We offered $40,000. I think the kid would have signed for $40,000, but I didn't push it. So it's not like I'm out there to push some kid into doing anything. The kid will do what he wants to do, believe me, unless mother and father have such a hold on him, and that's not fair to the young man themselves sometimes, because 3 years later the kid may not get the opportunity to play professional baseball again. Then what to say to his parents? You know, you blew my chance.
And does that happen very often? Where
everyone, I'm sure it happens. How much? I don't think it happens that much. If a kid is a good player when he's young, he's definitely should have a chance to get a chance again, unless he injures himself. And that's another part that comes into play in this business, the injury problem, especially with pitchers.
I was going to say, Sandy, you being a pitcher, did you ever have any problems with your arm, and did that ever worry you when you knew that you were a prospect? Did you kind of lay back and really watch that?
Well, you have to. I mean, your arm my arm is my livelihood, and I did have arm problems. Spring training 1981, I had the short job in Cleveland. It was mine, and I threw a curveball. It was a cold day, and my elbow went. And boy, and I used to warm up, and in 10 pitches I was ready to go, and it changed your whole outlook on how you take care of yourself. And it was a nagging injury that went on with my career, and finally in 1984 my arm broke while pitching.
We're going to talk about that in a bit. We got to take a quick break, but before we take a break, I want to ask that give us a call over at California Mortgage. You'll see the number at the end of the screen. I'll give it to you, 559-0100. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to get into each of their backgrounds in a moment. We're going to start with Rick. I want to ask Rick some, about his personal background, as well as Sandy and Jim. I have to say at this time, I've had the privilege of working with these guys in one way or the other. Rick and I used to be roommates a little while ago, and we coached together with Deanne's, and Sandy and I played ball together, and he struck me out 5 times in one game. Not real proud of that. But and Jim and I coached together over at Deanne's College as well, so it's a real pleasure having you guys again. And,
Thank you.
But Rick, I want to ask you about some background. I know you came from the Midwest, is that correct? And why don't you give us some background about your baseball career?
Yes, Brian. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin called Waterloo. There's 2,000 people in the town, and I was the best player in that town. I think it was all city every year because we only had one high school. So, but I grew up in a small town, and I went to University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh, where I excelled in baseball at that level. And after my junior year in college, I was signed by the San Francisco Giants, drafted in the 10th round that year in 1970. And I went on to a real short career with the Giants. I was not a good hitter, and as the competition level
And what position
took off, my batting average went down.
And your position?
I played in the rookie league, and I played in the A-ball in the Midwest League.
Your position?
Second base.
Oh, second base. Okay.
Yeah, and but I was a student of the game. Baseball was always my first love, and I studied it a lot. I read books, and I worked hard at it. Just that sometimes ability doesn't let you take you to the big leagues. It's more involved than just reading books. You got to be a player to make it and keep going up the level. But then from there, I went to University of Arizona, got my graduate degree, my master's degree there, as a matter of fact. I worked there under Jerry Kindle, and the year I was there, we won the College World Series, 1976, and I was just very lucky and very fortunate to be there that year. And from there, I went to De Anza College. Ed Brusou hired me, And those were 3 or 4 of the best years I ever had in coaching. I enjoyed working with Eddie Brissou as well as I've worked with anybody else ever. And from there, scouting took its phase through Patty Cottrell, who was retiring, a longtime Texas Ranger and Washington Senator scout. He wrote the office in Texas and said that he would like me to be his replacement. I took a small interview, or a short interview with them, and based on Patty Cottrell's opinion, I was hired by Texas Rangers to do this job now that I'm now doing, scouting. So that's pretty much my background on that.
And you thoroughly enjoying scouting?
Yeah, I would not want to do another job, I don't think, really. I think I'm very, very fortunate and very lucky to work for a good club like the Texas Rangers and just to be in the business of professional baseball.
Great. Sandy, why don't you give us some background about your career as well, starting at Homestead High School, I guess.
Well, I grew up in the area and played my, I guess, growing-up baseball in the Mountain View Little Leagues. Then my freshman year in high school, I moved to the Homestead High School district, which you talk about some things that are meant to be. All my friends that I grew up with in high school ended up playing water polo, and I went to Awald High School, which the baseball program was so-so, and I was very fortunate to come to Jim's program at Homestead High School. And what I learned there helped me. It's amazing when coaches talk about fundamentals. I mean, covering first base, fielding the bunt, just thinking about baseball. I mean, from whether you're going to be a scout, if you're going to be a player or a coach, you have to think things out and what's going to happen. And at Homestead, I learned all the fundamentals that was just people tried to teach you through the years in professional sports, and it was real good. And from high school, drafted by the Royals, I elected not to sign. Took a 4-year scholarship to Washington State, turned down some other schools that were in the area, but I wanted out, and I thought that Washington was where I wanted to go. Went up there on a recruit trip, just a beautiful August day, and said, this is where I'm going to go to school. So I got there and learned that I think California was where I belonged, and so I came back to De Anza.
So you loaded up the truck and you...
Loaded up the truck, hitchhiked back in from Livermore, and came home and finished up at De Anza that year, and was drafted by the Cleveland Indians, who still didn't offer me the type of money that I knew that I was going to get at somewhere in my career. Went on and played summer ball, played up through Alaska, and went back to the college NBC World Series for summer baseball, and had a great World Series, and was offered the money that I wanted, and signed with the Cleveland Indians. Played with them through until spring training 1984, 1970, 1980, and 82, parts of those years in the major league level, and back and forth between most of the other years in AAA, and it was good. And so since I've been out, I've been working in real estate, and they say that when you come out of certain sports, you never forget where you learned your good habits or where you think. So came back into the real estate and working again with Jim Hemphill.
With the coach.
Made me very successful at that.
Well, good. Jim, give us some background on your personal background as well in your coaching career.
Brian, I was born and raised in Berkeley, and was fortunate. We had a good high school and summer coach, and he had us, that's all we did every summer. And in fact, my Legion team, that we went to the state my senior year, we had 7 guys out of the 9 eventually sign professional contract, and 3 guys played in the major league. So we had a good ball club. Went on to college for 2 years, signed after my sophomore year, and played 3 years in the minor leagues in that time Kansas City Athletic Organization. Was going to school in the off season while I was playing ball, and then after my 3rd year, I had 1 year left, and I graduated from San Jose State and got my first job coaching at Homestead High School, and spent 13 great years coaching at Homestead.
And you won some championships there. I know that the Homestead seemed to always be up there at the top. And Sandy mentioned fundamentals that seem to be the boring part of baseball, really, for a player. But those are what championship teams are built around, it seems like. So I was going to ask you, who are some of the characters of the game? I know you coached a lot of players, but who are some of the ones that stand out in your mind like Sandy, I'm sure would be one of them. But is there some other ones?
We had, in fact, one funny story very quickly. I'll tell you, one of Sandy's catchers, a guy we call Stubby, Tony Marinero, was a real short catcher, still lives in the area, and we see him quite often. And one day, one of the things the kids will all tell you, well, I was always out raising money for the program, and we were selling candies or you name it. So we raised a lot of money, got one of these first pitch machines that threw curveballs. It was a Curve Master. So the day they delivered it, at my PE class, Tony was my assistant, PE assistant. So I had him get on his, go get his catcher's glove, and I got that thing fired up and electricity on it. And
No,
of course,
no. He didn't have the mask on.
no, I didn't have the mask, just the catcher's glove, because I was just going to get those wheels going. And I just had it shooting out at how it was set. I didn't bother to read the directions. Put a ball in there and got him about 60 feet away. That ball came flying out about 100 miles an hour. Knuckleball, because the tires were identical. He missed the ball, hit him in the chest, and I think he's still got a Wilson tattoo right across his chest.
And the funny part, Brian, is he's in a squat and he got hit and he just rolled backwards. He just somersaulted backwards.
We had a lot of characters, but I couldn't begin to name them all.
Oh, yeah,
but there were a lot of funny stories that we had. It's like the four of us right here. This could be an hour-and-a-half show and go by real quick.
Yeah. Well, you're right, and some of the things that we probably shouldn't discuss on TV anyway. But Rick, one thing I got to ask you too is that you've scouted a lot of players. What determines a player's value, and what is the value today of let's say a top-notch player coming out of college? What determines that?
Well, Brian, I used to know the value, but every year it's getting worse. I don't know the value anymore because some teams are signing players out of college and high school to sums of money now that I don't think that anyone thought would ever be reached. So the amount of money for a player now is just getting astronomical. I think it's just a sign of the times, and well, I don't know where it's all going, because it's almost scary to me. Because I mean, I like some player an awful lot, but the amount of money they're willing to give him scares me, because my name's on him. If he fails, well, I'll say, well, that's the guy Schroeder signed. He can't play a lick. But it's the college player. If he gets away from the pros in high school and he goes to college and becomes a player we think he's going to be a first-round pick. And he's mature, and pretty much what you see is pretty close to what you're going to get. There isn't a lot of guessing or evaluating or projecting this guy beyond, physically wise. He's pretty much in stature what he's going to be. Whereas the high school kid, you're going to really have to project him. And when he shows you those things, he can do this and do that, and he has the skills already, and he's going to get stronger physically. It's just a matter of maturation process in most cases. Mm-hmm. He's worth top dollar even more than the college guy is, because he's going to play in the big leagues when he's 21 years old. Mm-hmm. Whereas the guy in college is coming out at 21, and very few go into the major leagues out of college. Very few.
What about some of the players like a Will Clark, though, who come from outstanding programs, and they make the transition real easy?
Well, you said the key word, outstanding player. He's the kind of guy that if he'd have signed out of high school would have been playing in the big leagues when he was 21 years old also. He'd have probably beat the system. He would have been in the big leagues a year, almost 2 years earlier than he was the way it is, because that's the kind of player he was. But his transition from the college game to the pro game was not good and not easy. Us to scout the California League, which is another one of my jobs. In the summertime, you scout the professional leagues in the California League, and at that time, Fresno had the Giants. Now they have them in San Jose.
Or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
We look for trades, and we evaluate kids in the minor leagues to get a trade or whatever comes up. But Will Clark did not play well his first year in pro ball. He had a real hard time. And so did Mark McGuire. In fact, Mark McGuire had to come back and repeat the California League the following year. And it all comes back down to the transition from the wooden bat to the aluminum bat. And that's a whole other story in itself.
I think what you find, too, in professional baseball is that whereas you're playing at the college level or high school level, you've got guys that might have a good curveball that get it over every so often. But once you get into the professional sports, you've got a guy that, of course, it varies as you go up. But in A-ball, you've got 5 guys on a staff that can get the curveball and a fastball over, and they've got something on it. And so all of a sudden, instead of hitting 400 because in high school or college, you maybe you didn't hit so well off the good pitchers, but you just made mincemeat out of the so-so pitchers. And once you get into the pro levels, all of a sudden these guys are throwing a little bit better. And as you climb up the ladder from AA to AAA, and of course at the major league level, all of a sudden these guys find your weakness, and that fastball at 90 miles an hour happens to be within a little square like that every time they throw it. Mm-hmm. And if they do make a mistake, you've got to hit. And that's the difference where a guy like Will Clark now, who, when guys are making mistakes, he's going to hit it. But it just takes adjustments, and they'll start really honing in on your weakness. And if you can't adjust to that, you're going to be gone. Same thing with a pitcher. So
I know that as a pitcher, you wanted to hit a lot too. I probably just
I used to hit. I used to swing a lot. Of course, the one thing in my professional career, I was 4 for 10 playing.
Congratulations.
4 hits in 10 years.
Well, we gotta move on for today's show, but I want to thank you guys, Rick, Sandy, and Jim. Thanks for joining us today. And Jim's like an old timer here. It's the second show he's been on here, and I want to thank you guys for being here.
Good. Thank you, Brian.
Join us next week for What's Up in the 90s. Until then, see you later.